You're listening to Sophie and Sebastian, the podcast of children's stories for anyone who loves children. This episode is made possible through a generous donation by Henry and Anne Shooten of Yarrow, BC. They would like the story to be dedicated to their grandchildren, including Sophie and Sebastian. Thanks, Openoma, for supporting the show. This story is called Serendipity. Sebastian and Sophie were sitting in the comfy chairs in the living room. It was nice and warm inside. Outside, it was snowing lightly, and the sky looked as grey as a goose. "Guess what?" said Sophie. "What?" asked Sebastian. "Mum says I'm not allowed to start a new collection. Too much clutter," she said. "What did you want to collect?" asked Sebastian. "Oh, I don't know. Stuffies, little ponies, bracelets, rocks, earrings, headbands, coins, jewels." Sophie looked through the front window. A few flakes of snow drifted by. "What about invisible things?" asked Sebastian. "They don't take up any room." "Good point. But what kinds of invisible things are there?" "Angels," suggested Sebastian. "True, but they're hard to find, and even if you caught one, you would probably be blinded by all the light." "I guess," said Sebastian. "Hey, what about ghosts?" "Maybe. We could use Mum's canning supplies for storing them, but I'm not sure how you can even catch them. Mrs. Wilson might know. She once said that she has a ghost in her attic. She says it's an old poet who died when he couldn't find the right words for one of his poems." "How would that make him die?" "I don't know," said Sophie, "though I think Mrs. Wilson might be trying to trick us. Who would ever get that upset about a bunch of words?" "Hey, words are invisible too." "You're a genius, Sebastian," shouted Sophie. "Well, right now you said something pretty smart, but most of the time you're still kind of useless." "Oh, and words are only invisible as long as you don't write them down. But we can definitely collect words." Sebastian laughed. He felt quite proud that he had come up with a good idea, but he wasn't quite sure how it worked. "How do you collect words?" he asked. Sophie thought for a minute. Then she said, "I don't think it works to collect every word. You have to collect the special ones, the ones that people really like. Those are the most valuable." "I know what," said Sebastian. "We'll just go ask everyone what's their favorite word." "That's a great idea. By the way, what's yours?" "Mine? Mine is the." "That's it? Just the?" "I guess, but you can use it almost in any sentence, so it's pretty good, I think." "All right then," said Sophie. "My favorite word is blubber. It's just so much fun to say. Try it. Blubber. It just sounds all blubbery and squiggly." Sebastian tried to say it. "Blubber. Blubber." "Don't say it too much, though," said Sophie. "Otherwise, it's not special anymore." "Okay, how about we each go ask a bunch of other people about their favorite words? I'll be nice this time. I'll ask the neighbors, and you can ask our own family." "Deal," said Sebastian. "See you in a bit." Then Sophie put on her winter gear and ran outside. Meanwhile, Sebastian went downstairs, where he found Mum in her sewing room. She was making a beautiful quilt for Sebastian's bed. Not that Sebastian cared much about quilts, but he said, "Nice work, Mum. By the way, what's your favorite word?" "Favorite word?" asked Mum. "Now that's an odd question. I think my favorite word is oopsie-daisy. Maybe that's 2 words, I don't know." "You do say that all the time," said Sebastian, "especially when you make a mistake, though sometimes you say something worse." I know, said Mum, but don't copy me if I say the wrong thing sometimes. That's why oopsie-daisy is such a nice word, and it's just fun to say. Like blubber? No, not like blubber. I don't really like that word. I used to have a friend named Belinda, and people called her Blubber Belinda. That wasn't very nice. Oh, okay. Well, thanks anyway. Meanwhile, Sophie knocked on old Mrs. Wilson's door. Come on in, shouted Mrs. Wilson, who had a hard time getting up from her chair. Sophie went inside. Hi, Mrs. Wilson, she said. I won't be long. Just a quick question. What's your favorite word? Mrs. Wilson put down her magazine and stuck her reading glasses into her grey hair. Oh, what a lovely question, she said. Are you writing a poem? Not right now, said Sophie. But Sebastian and me are starting a collection of people's favorite words. We're wondering if we can have one of yours. That sounds like a noble cause, said Mrs. Wilson. I would be most happy to donate a word to your collection. Now, let me see. I have many favorite words. Epiphany, sinister, cutlery, turquoise, giraffe, Flibbertigibbet. Wow, said Sophie. Sounds like you already have your own collection. But which one is your favorite? Good point, said Mrs. Wilson. I was getting carried away. My favorite has to do with poetry. It's the word enjambment. Enjambment, repeated Sophie. That's a funny word. What does it mean? Well, said Mrs. Wilson, you know how a poem looks different than normal writing? A poem is written down in separate lines, each below the last. Normally, when you get to the end of a line, you pause. But sometimes, just sometimes, the idea keeps going past the end of the line. And when there is no pause at all, then that's called enjambment. Kind of like the lines are jammed together? Asked Sophie. She wasn't really getting it, but she thought she would play along. Kind of like that, agreed Mrs. Wilson. But if that word is too hard, then I also just like jam. Jam is good, said Sophie, especially raspberry jam. Yes, raspberry jam, strawberry jam, blackberry jam, orange marmalade, you name it. Awesome. Well, I better get going, Mrs. Wilson, because I need more words for our collection yet. No problem, and thanks for stopping by. Then Sophie went out again to find more words. Soon after, Sophie and Sebastian were back in the living room. You go first, said Sophie. What did you all get? Well, said Sebastian, first I went to Mum, and her word was oopsie-daisy. Then I asked Lucas. He was playing basketball on the Xbox, and when I asked him, he said, swish! I think he really likes that word because he sounded super happy when he said it. Then I asked Dad, and his word was a weird one. It's serendipity, and he said it means that when things happen by accidentally, but they still turn out just great, then it's called serendipity. Weird word, said Sophie. I knew he liked that one because he said it the other day too. Serendipity is a happy ending when you don't expect it. He's just showing off, though. Yeah, and then I went to Tessa and I asked her what her favorite word was, and she said nothing. Okay, so you collected 4 words. Oopsie-daisy, swish, serendipity, and nothing. How many did you get? Asked Sebastian. Let me see. First I went to Mrs. Wilson, and she had so many words. She talked about sinister epiphanies and turquoise-tea giraffes, but her favorite word is enjambment, or something like that. Oh, and she also likes jam. Then I went to Bert and Fran. Bert's favorite word is donut, as he likes to eat them. And Fran said her favorite word is Sophie, which is just awkward, because what are you going to say? Thanks, Fran. See you later. I'm out of here. That's just too awkward. I guess we're done then, said Sebastian. Nope, said Sophie. That's just the beginning. There are all kinds of things you can do with a collection. Like you can make people happy by saying their favorite words to them. You just say the word? No, you silly. You kind of slip it in as if it's just the accident. All right, what else? What else? Well, you can organize your words. Like we have jam and we have a donut, so we can have some words that are all about food. But then donut also goes with nothing, because once you eat it, there's nothing left. And, added Sebastian, some donuts have a hole in the middle. Good point. But before Sophie and Sebastian could figure out what other words fit together, Tessa and Lucas wanted to know if they wanted to come sledding. And when you have to choose between sledding and organizing your collection of words, it's not hard to know which comes first. Yay! Shouted Sebastian, and everyone ran to put on their snow pants, toques, mittens, and scarves. Even Mum came along this time. You might not know it, but even some mums have a bit of a crazy streak, where they just want to go flying down a hill at top speed. Pretty soon after, they all arrived at the top of a humongous hill. It was actually called 7 Hills, because at one point there were 7 clear humps. That proved to be too dangerous for sledding, as people would go flying over each bump, gathering more speed all the time. So they shaved off a few of the hilly bits. Instead of 7 humps, bumps, and jumps, there were about 3 gentle curves left. It was busy at the top. Dozens of people in colorful coats and scarves milled around, or sat on their magic carpets and sleds, waiting for the perfect time to inch to the edge of the hill, crunching the crisp snow under their feet before cruising down at top speed. Sophie sat on a bright blue sled that was as round as a saucer. Or a donut, Sophie thought. That's what Bert would have said. But Bert wasn't there, so there was nothing to say. Nothing. Donut. Funny how these words slipped into her mind. Oh well, she said out loud. Let's get going, she shouted. Then everyone pushed off at once, and down went Sophie, Tessa, Lucas, Mum, and Sebastian, all in a blur of speed and color. Down, down, faster and faster, the sled slid over the icy snow. Swish, swish, thought Sophie. That's the sound of a sled. Swish, swish. Lucas would like that. But she couldn't tell him because she just flew over a jump and had to hold on for dear life. They were almost at the bottom now. Mum was in front of her, but was trying to slow down. Snow was spraying everywhere. Watch out, yelled Sophie. She tried to dig her heels into the snow. It was too late. Sophie crashed into Mum. She went flying off her sled, and then Tessa came up from behind her and clipped her as she flew by. Sophie rolled a few more times and came to a stop in a snowbank. That was awesome, yelled Sebastian, who was already running back up the hill. Oopsie-daisy, said Mum. Are you okay? Sophie felt a strange stabbing feeling in her wrist. With her other hand, she wiped the snow off her face. She tried to collect her thoughts. Enjambment, she said. What? Asked Mum. Are you okay? You look a little dizzy. All in a jam, said Sophie. Mrs. Wilson. Sophie, said Mum, what are you blabbering about? Blabbering? Nothing. Ah! What's with these words? Are you in pain? Sophie paused. She thought about how everyone's favorite words kept popping up in her mind, even when she didn't want them to, even when she thought she had left her collection at home. Finally, she said, "I think it's the opposite of serendipity." "What? You are a strange child," said Mum, and Sophie couldn't agree more. Later, Mum took Sophie to the hospital, and as it turned out, Sophie had broken her arm. She's now in a cast. But whatever you do, don't ask her how it happened. She has no favorite words to describe her sledding adventure. In fact, the only thing that would make her happy would be an actual donut filled with jam.